Welcome to Scarlet Tavern. Grab a drink, take a seat, and let's begin. On tonight's episode, we take a look at part 2 of the Toy Box Killer. Who knew a guy named David could turn out to be more disturbing than Chucky? This is Scarlet Tavern. So, back with part 2 of A Sick Fuck.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, well, I guess let's just jump right into it. So, on April 26th, Glenda Jean Jessie Ray, for those keeping track at home, that is the daughter of David Parker Ray. She was arrested and charged with kidnapping women for sexual torture. More charges were added to Ray's, now totaling 37 counts. At Jessie Ray's arraignment, her lawyer, Billy Blackburn, sounds like a great lawyer, entered a not guilty plea. He stated that she vehemently and adamantly denies any such involvement with her father and predicted that many more people would be arrested before this case was over. One newspaper reported that Jessie had told the police 13 years earlier that her father had abducted and sold women in Mexico, but no victims were identified and apparently there was no record of this report. Regardless of how many accomplices Ray did or did not have, he was quickly diagnosed by FBI profilers as a criminal sexual sadist. Carl Berg wrote a book called The Sadist about serial killer Peter Curtin. Another one we're going to get into. It was one of the first psychiatric works devoted to the subject of a person who tortures others for his own pleasure. And just for a little hint, Curtin would chew on his victims during sex before killing them. Peter Curtin was a nasty little fucking dude. We'll definitely be doing Peter Curtin. The word derives from the 19th century work of Richard von Krafft-Ebing in his book Psychopathia Sexualis, in which he set out to collect various sexual crimes into medical categories. He based the concept of deriving pleasure from humiliating or inflicting pain on other sentient beings on the writings of the 18th century Marquis de Sade.
Marquis de Sade,
whose philosophical pornography detailed violent sexual episodes, including murder. Krafft-Ebing thought that sadism in males was a distortion of the sexual instinct, and he was so certain it was exclusive to males that he never studied female sadists. In Hickey's Sex Crimes and Paraphilia, Lisa Schaefer and Julie Penn spell out the nature of paraphilia, known as sadism. They indicate that it may or may not involve consent, and for some offenders, it's definitely more exciting to inflict pain on non-consensual victims. Most sadists begin as masochists, these authors say, who are aroused by the receipt of pain or humiliation. They then move into a dominating role and find they prefer it. Some even develop such a hunger for sadistic arousal that they become rapists and murderers. Among the most notable examples, besides Ray, are somebody who we talked about, Robert Berdella, and Canadian team of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. Another one who we will talk about.
we heard a lot about that around here. They're actually from just on the other side of the border with us.
Yeah, they had 3 women that they kept as sex slaves and killed. And it was very rare to have a team like that. The types of activities sadists enjoy include whipping, handcuffing people, hanging them, choking victims into unconsciousness, and then reviving them, stomping on them, using substances to induce altered states of consciousness, electrocuting, piercing, raping, cutting, and keeping them imprisoned. They might also enjoy inflicting humiliation such as covering victims in excrement. Some sadists even hire themselves out to masochists to inflict a controlled, choreographed scenario. While there are differing opinions on this condition, its causes remain obscure and it appears to form during certain associations in adolescence. Even so, more than one-third of people with this condition report discovering their condition well into adulthood. They enjoy the feeling of power and authority that arises from having their way with a vulnerable human being. There is no known effective therapy for those who compulsively harm others and not in a non-consensual, illegal manner. There is. It's called shooting them in the head.
I'm not against it.
It's also called castration. Ray had yet to be convicted, but one FBI agent who had seen the contents of Ray's toy box stated that the time, money, and effort spent on building up his extensive and varied inventory supported the fact that he was among the most extreme of sexual sadists. It was time to get him into court. State District Judge Neil Mertz made the decision to have Ray tried separately for each of the 3 victims. Very, very smart thing. The reason that this was done by it being tried separately, because the problem is there's no, like with everything else with the not having bodies, obviously he's not being charged for all of those because there's no proof, but we have varying degrees of evidence for each of the victims. If they would have been tried on all accounts and the jury would have seen, oh, there's not enough evidence for this victim, all of them would have been thrown out and it would have been done. By him trying them 3 separate victims, it gets at least one of them to stick, hopefully. So this was a very smart judge.
Yeah, and luckily also none of these cases were linked to another. Very famous case where they tried them separately, but they were one was linked to another. It was the Aaron Hernandez case. Aaron Hernandez killed his fiance's sister's boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, and killed him and all that, but they couldn't talk about why he killed him because it was about a murder trial that was also happening separately. So you can't talk about 2 different cases. In that case, that was very risky. In this case, it worked out beautifully because they're all separate entities. You don't, like you said, lose one, you got the other 2.
Correct. And let's say they would have done all 3, and it would have been non-conclusive. They would have been able to throw it out. And let's say they get new evidence on one of the other ones that, oh, this is a slam dunk. Well, I'm sorry, he'll never be able to be tried again for those. It's a thing called Double Jeopardy. Also a very good movie. Watch the movie Double Jeopardy. Very good movie.
Like half of it.
But Double Jeopardy just means that you cannot be tried for the same crime twice. Now, this means the same victim. So let's say there's another victim. He can be tried for that one. But if they had put all 3 of these together, case was dismissed, new evidence came up for the first victim, they couldn't have tried him again. So doing it this way, it gave them more of a chance to get everything done. So one trial was to begin March 28th, 2000 in Tierra Amarilla for the kidnapping and sexual assault of Cynthia V. Judge Mertz had made it difficult to use all the evidence, according to Glatton Fielder, as he suppressed Ray's early interviews with the FBI and New Mexico State Police. He also banned the media from the voir dire in which jury members were selected. And he
voir dire.
Yeah, voir dire. And he would soon punch even more holes into the case. Just after the jury selection, Ray apparently suffered a heart attack and was rushed to a hospital in Las Cruces. He did have a history of heart trouble, his attorney Jeff Rain said, but the prosecutor believed he could also be trying to delay proceedings. If so, he succeeded, as the judge postponed for another week. That led to more legal delays, and a number of expert witnesses from the FBI were excluded. Then, unexpectedly, Judge Mertz decided to start a different trial, this one for the charge of kidnapping and torture in 1996 of the woman from Colorado. Although it was the case with the weakest evidence, Mertz scheduled the trial for the end of May. Ray was pleased with the delays, as if he were the one manipulating the system. It seemed to make him feel powerful, especially when Mertz excluded Ray's printed sheet of procedures for handling captives and all devices found in the trailer, as no one could prove they had been there in 1996. While the prosecution had the victim's testimony about what had been done, as well as the videotape, that did not mean that the items she had seen were the same ones acquired during the 1999 search. On May 7th, Angelica M., the second victim to accuse Ray, died from pneumonia at age 25.
Wow.
She'd become a drug addict, apparently unable to get past her horrendous experience. Without her testimony, that trial was potentially off the books.
Eesh.
So it's crazy. So this is 1999, 2000. She died at 25 years old of pneumonia. It's very rare for that to happen, especially at her age. But she's also a drug addict.
Yeah, so that's probably doing a lot to her health, her immune system, and everything. I just can't get over the judge. He just seems like he's determined to hack and slash the case here.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not a legal expert by any means. I don't. We didn't go into a lot of the legal details on this. I mean, it just seems like, well, we can't prove that these are the same items, even though she described these items. What?
Yeah, I don't know. A few days later, Cindy Hendy, now age 40, formally received her sentence. Cynthia V was present in court, and she rose to tell the woman who had helped to terrorize her, "Rot in hell." Hendy was sent to the Women's Correctional Center in Grants, New Mexico. On May 23rd, jury selection for Ray's first trial finally got underway. In this case, he faced 12 counts of sexual abuse, kidnapping, and conspiracy. The victim, whose name was kept from the papers, took the stand to testify what Ray had done to her. She had been 22 at the time. She claimed that Ray had tied her up and kept her naked the entire time she was at his trailer. However, her memory was murky, and she wasn't able to convey very well that she'd clearly been held against her will. She had probably been drugged, but that could not be proven. Although the videotape was played for the jury and the victim insisted she would never have agreed to this kind of treatment, she was not a very good witness on her own behalf. On July 14th, the papers reported that Judge Mertz had declared a mistrial. Although the jurors had deliberated for more than 8 hours, they claimed they could not come to an agreement about the 12 charges. 2 of them could not find Ray guilty of criminal assault. The jurors who had voted to acquit, both in their 20s, had decided that the victim had not persuaded them that Ray had kept her against her will. "I was not positive he was torturing her," one told a reporter for the New York Daily News. "There's a lot of people who enjoy rough sex."
Best statement ever.
Yeah. When the accuser heard this news, she broke down in tears, unsure why the jury had not believed her. What would it take to convince people that she had not sought out this treatment nor wanted it? She failed to understand. Ray showed no visible reaction, but Rain thought it was a sign that the jury had paid attention to the evidence or lack of it. Ray would be tried again, which meant the victim would once more have to relive the ordeal. So this is the other thing that you have to understand. We were just talking about double jeopardy. Mistrial does not warrant double jeopardy.
No.
Mistrial just means something was wrong with this trial. We can go ahead and redo it. Now, if he was acquitted or also declared not guilty, then they could not try and charge him again. But because this was a mistrial, they're able to go ahead and do it again and try and get more evidence. Really, I mean, it comes down to witness prep. This girl, when you go to court, um, when you go to court, especially for prosecutors on the prosecuting side, you sit with the district attorney or the ADA, the assistant district attorney. Sit down there, you go over the case files, they talk about your statements, they do, most of the time, especially in something as high profile as this, they do a mock trial to get you used to it, where that district attorney is now going to play a defense attorney and try and throw you off your game and make sure that they get any bugs out. That is something that should have been done. I don't know if it was. That's something that should have been done with this girl, especially because of her memory issues. If she had memory issues, she never should have been up on that stand.
No, unfortunately, I think the prosecutor's office, I think probably in their minds, they knew they were dealing with a sick son of a bitch that was David Ray Parker, and they realized we gotta throw everything at him and just hope to God something sticks. Probably, I would hope you're right that they would have thought to do at least some witness preparation, do that and whatever. But it may have come down to, without us actually seeing that, whatever he did to her, probably, I don't think her memory was probably ever gonna get any better in this case. So I guess there's only so much you could do.
Well, now, again, granted, this is 2000. We're in 2023, 23 years later. There's a lot that can be done for somebody who has a spotty memory of stuff. There are specific techniques that when we get into doing witness statements and things like that, we have the ability. We'll basically sit down with somebody and say, "Close your eyes. What do you hear? What do you smell?" And because your brain may block some stuff out, but there are certain things that will trigger something. Scent is the biggest trigger of all. Um, you you could, let's say you're walking down the street and somebody walks by you and you smell a perfume. That perfume, let's say it was on a ex-lover that you had 20 years ago. You will, the second you smell that perfume, you will think of that person. There's just something about the smell, the scent glands that trigger stuff. So that's why we always try and visually, you may not have remembered everything and your mind may be trying to block it out, but then there are certain triggers that can be done to try and unblock that. They could have taken her to a psychologist. And I mean, people go as far as hypnosis to try and get this done.
There's also what they call a regression therapy, which is very similar to hypnosis. Not quite as induced, and it's basically like Caleb's saying, we're going to walk you backwards through the years and take you as young as we can for all these memories and see what unlocks. Does this memory unlock the next one? Does it unlock the next one? Does it unlock the next one? So
Interestingly, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, I learned from listening to about another crime. I guess I don't know about New Mexico, but I know in a few states, including California, witnesses that go under any kind of like induced like states of mind for interviews, like hypnosis, their testimony is actually inadmissible.
It depends on, number one, the state, and it also depends on who it is that's doing the hypnosis. If they are a clinician that is um, trained and proficient with that and can establish a track record and that can say, hey, in the 25 cases that I've done, I've used this particular type of hypnosis in 15 of them. Of those 15, this was the result with no dire effects, then that then establishes a precedence for that clinician. So a lot of courts across the country won't use it because there's still a lot of
Stigma.
Stigma, yeah, a lot of stigma and belief that it is a lot of hocus pocus, and you're gonna make the person bark like a dog when they hear a bell, or quack like a duck when you mention a word, that kind of thing. A lot of parlor tricks involved, but
so District Attorney Ron Lopez gave a statement about his disappointment, but he may not have been surprised. From the start, he knew this had been their weakest case and that the victim herself would be on trial. Young girls who were out drinking were generally viewed with disapproval. Nevertheless, Lopez and his team declared their intent to retry Ray at a later date. It's not over yet, he said. The state of New Mexico is not letting this defendant off the hook. Jury selection began in November 2000 for the retrial, with Jim Yance as the prosecutor. But just a few days into it, Judge Mertz died. That delayed the proceedings, as did the disqualification of 2 more judges. Finally, on April 9th, 2001, the trial commenced, with Los Lunas attorney Kevin Suizia just appointed a judge on the judge's bench. So we are getting a brand new judge. The Court of Appeals had upheld Mertz's ruling about the items found inadmissible, so Yance once again had an uphill climb. But he was more prepared to emphasize the nature of the victim's ordeal. The same people testified, including the victim. She testified about her abduction from a bar shortly after her marriage had fallen apart. She described being led on a leash like a dog from the large trailer to a smaller one. Her feet were placed into stirrups and she was strapped into place, whereupon Ray began to insert dildos of different sizes into her. She wanted to leave, she said, and she heard Ray lock and unlock the door many times. She was given nothing to eat or drink. Ray's new attorney, Lee McMillian, asked her why it had taken 3 years for her to come forward with the story. He also hammered her with differences in her testimony from the previous trial. She could only explain that her memory was hazy. He suggested it was all a fantasy that she'd made up. A psychotherapist, David Spencer, testified. Just as he had in the first trial, he had been treating the victim, and her sleep disorders were consistent with post-traumatic stress disorder. Ray's audio tape and the videotape he'd made of what he had done to this victim were played in court. The victim cried as she watched, but the jury members showed no reaction. It seemed possible they might be inclined, like the first jury, to acquit. The defense called no witnesses because an expert on sadomasochist psychology was disallowed. This person supposedly would have addressed the nature of consensual sexual fantasy play that involved the rituals that Ray had used. Ray said that he wanted to testify on his own behalf, but his attorney had advised against it. He vowed that if he was convicted, he would fight all the way to the Supreme Court. If you're innocent, you're innocent, he said. I am innocent. So this is the thing with him, is throughout everything, he maintained that he was innocent, that everything was consensual. He said that with everything in his trailer, that they were all for the pleasure of women, that he got off by them being pleasured.
Yeah, that's it.
Um,
I I honestly, I gotta tip my hat off to his lawyer. His lawyer seemed to have figured out the only way that his client David Ray, had a chance of getting off was for him to shut up, sit there, look like as much like a statue as possible, and hope to God that he could make it look like that the victim was either just confused and full of drugs or was just making this stuff up, because that was really, once they started testifying into the details, I mean, that shock value alone, that stuff like that, I mean, you guys have been to court more than I have, but that stuff, like, you get that shock of, oh my God, you did that, you sick bastard, you must be guilty. I mean, plenty of interviews with jurors that when they ask, well, where was it that you decided you were guilty? It's like, when I heard about the crime and I looked at him, it's like, yep, that happened. So I could only imagine what would have happened if he had gone on the stand. He probably would have guaranteed himself a conviction on the
well,
first trial.
and this is the thing is I'm not sure why the jury had no reaction to the tape. That I've heard the tape before. I'll see if I can find it. Um, the tape's creepy. It is just him talking on a tape, giving his rules about what's going to happen. He says, you're going to be tied up. You're going to perform oral sex on me. I'm going to rape you. I'm going to do this and this and this and this. Um, and we, and the tape always starts with, um, like, hello, bitch. And then he goes from there. It's a very creepy tape. Um, and if I remember, it's like 5 minutes long.
He's
It's if I can find it, because we're recording now. If I could find it, I will put it at the end of this video.
I mean,
Of this audio recording.
I
'Cause
guess it's hard. We don't know we don't see what their reaction was. For all we know, they had a reaction. They were just expecting people to, pearl clutching and swooning down, like, oh my God, how could you? I mean, maybe to them, not doing that was like they didn't have any reaction. But then again, I mean, if a bunch of people are staring at me in the courtroom, I've seen jury boxes. I mean, you're kind of like right there front and center. I probably wouldn't do anything. I'd probably be trying to keep a straight poker face as well.
um, I I don't know. I don't know what, like, it's almost like these people were desensitized to
That
this.
could be. I mean, Aaron, you've obviously testified in court. I mean, what's the weirdest jury reaction you ever saw that you can talk about? Obviously, if you can't talk about it, that's understandable.
Probably that. I mean, what they're describing, the lack of sensitivity, or like I remember one. I won't get into the details of the case, but we had picked this specific juror because we 100% expected them to react a certain way when we disclosed um, some of the key pieces of evidence. And when that, excuse me, when that time came, the reaction was the complete opposite. And we just kind of looked at each other like, okay, um, that didn't go the way we thought it would. What do we do? Um, and I mean, court's a funny thing. Jury trials are a funny thing. Um, and for those that don't know and have never been a part of one, there is a huge chess game that goes on before that jury ever hits that box.
And
And it is a lot of psychology, a lot of reading, um, trying to figure out, is this person going to be in our favor? Do they look the part? Do they sound the part? Whatever. And unfortunately, a lot of people will come in and portray themselves as one way, in the hopes that they don't get selected, and they end up getting selected. And then along comes the trial, and out comes the true person. And you're like, well, that's not what we wanted. So, a lot of factors, man.
and
A
that
lot of
and
factors.
that's why you'll see most district attorneys love a plea bargain,
Oh, 100%.
because
100%.
it still gets a conviction,
Correct.
but they don't have to worry about a jury
Correct.
and
And
stuff
what
getting
most
acquitted.
people realize, your district attorneys and your state attorneys are conviction driven.
Oh yeah,
That's
it's their
how
right.
they
It's
get their money. That's how they get their pay raises. That's how their evaluations are done. And any one of you that are listening that are in that profession and you say that it's not the case, you're a liar.
Yeah.
yeah.
As simple as that.
I
Oh,
mean,
and
they're lawyers, so they lie
Yeah.
for a
Exactly.
living.
It's a given.
and there's
So,
also, I'm sure, depending on the case, there's probably an element of politics as well.
There is.
yes. Oh,
Because
yes.
Well,
Very
yeah, I
much
mean, district. A lot of people don't realize district attorneys are elected officials.
for the most part,
In
Correct.
in 90% of states, they are elected officials. I don't even know if there is a state where they're not elected.
Not that I know of.
I'm pretty sure
No.
every single state they are elected officials, and then
Correct.
both your DA and your ADA are elected officials, and then
Correct.
anything under them are hired by the district attorney and the ADA.
Right.
Right. And then, of course, there are stipulations to being a district attorney. You have to have X amount of years of law experience. You have to win a certain amount of cases, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And then it is the politics game. And typically a district attorney, because the voting is usually the same time that they vote for sheriff and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of the district attorneys and the ADAs will run alongside a sheriff. Because so
same
you have,
platform kind of thing.
yeah, so you have, and for those that don't know, the difference between, so in most places you have a sheriff's office and you have a police department. A sheriff's office, the sheriff, the head honcho, that is an elected official. They go through a voting process. A police department has a police chief. That is a hired official. That
Correct.
they are not elected in. They are sought out. Basically, whoever is in most cases, the mayor of whatever town
Right.
says,
Right.
hey, I like this person, put them in charge of the police department.
And that's the irony of the whole thing. I would say we'll use 90% just for a number, but it's a high percentage of police departments that are run by the mayor. 90% of those mayors have no law enforcement experience.
Yep.
No.
So they try and run it as a business, keeping in mind that they're politically appointed, politically elected. So your police department then becomes politically driven.
Another thing that often most people don't realize also on the federal side of this with the state U.S. attorneys who go after cases, these are the guys who go after organized crime cartels and other such things. Most times when they are making a case, they will often, and this is the kind of the clash between, like, say, FBI and other the law enforcement wing, who are generally career officers who work 10, 20 years, whereas U.S. attorneys, they are appointed by the president. Or
Yeah.
so their job, depending on the president, their job is usually only 8 years long,
Mhm.
if they're lucky.
And Right. And in a lot of those cases, it's
There,
not about the best candidate. It's about, well, I
Who's my
like your
friend?
face. I like the way you talk. I like
Yeah.
the fact that you stood behind my platform, blah, blah, blah.
mm-hmm. And also this plays into case selections of what they go after because they've only got 4 years. They got to
Correct.
make it look themselves look good because even if the incumbent president wins, they could still lose their job
Yeah.
because the president's like, I'm going to refocus the domestic policy agenda. You're not needed. Bye bye.
Correct.
You no longer serve at the pleasure of the president. So
And
it
that that brings up something that I was thinking about when we touched on the first trial and then into the second trial. And I think Ben, you had said, "What in the world? How did they not reach that conclusion or whatever?"
yeah
Um, the the thoughts that I had was, is this a small podunk town? Is it prosecutors and attorneys that have not been exposed to crime of this magnitude? Because all of those play a factor, just like it does in law enforcement and in the investigation aspect of it. If you have officers who may be phenomenal officers, but if they're in small podunk agencies that don't see a lot of crime and a lot of cases like I did and Caleb did and things of that nature, they're not gonna have that experience. They're not gonna know what to do. You know?
That city in 2000 had a population of
uh,
1,403.
And there's your answer.
yeah
So we're talking about number one, a podunk town.
Keep in mind,
Um,
this was a reservoir,
okay, so
Elephant Butt Reservoir.
podunk
So
town, small town lawyers, small town judge, small town officers. This they were in all aspects out of their element, one
yeah
hundred percent out of their element.
so
we
and I what so in 2000 we said 1,403. I'm looking at the population in 1999. It was 223.
Yeah. So
oh
they
In
were
1 year, it jumped up
this
1,200 people.
this was probably for them.
This was the biggest case they had ever
Yeah,
seen.
this would have been like one of their own walking on the moon.
And of course, this is probably the first time most of them have had FBI come
Yeah.
in, all of
yeah
that. So
which is surprising me. Like, why would the FBI not just be like, our case, state attorney takes
because
over?
there's still a lot of restrictions. The fact that no bodies were recovered, the FBI's hands were tied.
well, and
No body, no crime.
and the other thing too is technically the only time the FBI can do this, he was never labeled a serial killer because of
Correct.
there being no bodies. He's just a sexual sadist. The only
Correct.
time the FBI can get into something like this is with it being like this is if he had crossed state lines.
Yeah.
And that's
And
where
he
I was
did
going
not.
with that.
He
It
he
was
only
everything was
stayed in New Mexico.
localized.
Yeah.
It was to that area. So as much as the FBI probably wanted to, because I guarantee you that there was probably seasoned agents going, "This is a clusterfuck. This is a clusterfuck. This guy's gonna walk because these guys don't know, they're ass
What
from
they're
their
doing.
elbow kind of thing." And so there's that frustration. We had it with our agency.
Yeah.
You'd get the smaller agencies and the police officers involved with those agencies, and you're going, just let me get in there, let me take the lead. Could we have as the sheriff's department? Yeah, we could have, but
They
you
didn't ask
don't.
for it.
Number one, because they didn't ask for it, and number two, as a professional courtesy, hey, this is yours. But in this aspect, with the FBI becoming involved, they did what they could. We're giving you all the resources that we can. Here's the profilers, here's the investigators, here's this. I'm sure that they made their lab available and analysts available and things of that nature, but that's it. That's all we can do. We'd like to try the case for you. We'd like to try him federally instead of locally, but because we don't have proof that he crossed state lines, we can't do that.
Yeah, and just for uh retrospect, the town I was born in and where he worked was, I mean, it was technically a small town.
Yeah.
But in at this time it would have, I looked it up, it we had 113,000 population.
Right.
Compared to there, it's a huge place, but compared to a place like New York where the population is like 8 million.
Right. Or even Miami, where you have
Yeah.
Metro Dade, where the sheriff's office is so large that they basically took over the
Yeah.
police department because the police department couldn't do the job.
Yeah.
So,
That it's definitely the population plays a factor in everything.
yeah.
The jury convicted him, nevertheless, on all 12 charges for that case. So he gave an interview to Albuquerque television station KOB TV to offer his side. Get this. I feel raped, he said, with some irony. I got pleasure out of a woman getting pleasure. I did what they wanted me to do. To explain the sadistic tapes that he had created, he said, it was a source of entertainment for me to create these tapes. That's why there was a disclaimer at the beginning of the taping stated it was for adult entertainment only. With one conviction behind him, Ray now faced the possibility of worse yet to come, and that he might spend the rest of his life in jail. In June, Ray's second trial began. Again, he started up with claims of innocence, but within a week he had reached an agreement and a plea deal. He said he was willing to plead guilty to the charges in exchange for cutting a deal for his daughter. She would receive 5 years of probation. To his mind, her freedom was the greatest gift he could give her. In this deal, Ray received, get this, more than 223 years in prison. I can only be sorry for what I did, he said enigmatically. McMillian said that there may have been another reason that Ray accepted the plea deal. Every soul longs for redemption. The guy has the desire to do something good. No, the fuck he does not.
Yeah, okay.
He doesn't want to do good. He just knows that he's going to be convicted anyways.
Yeah, because once the word probably would have gotten out, oh, he's already been convicted, so potential jury pool's probably been tainted because now they're potentially a juror is going to sit down and be like, that guy was convicted for raping and torturing another woman.
Well, and on the hardest case possible with nothing to go on, with spotty memory and all of that. So if he was convicted on that, and then said, Ray even made a statement to the effect that the time in his cell would allow him an opportunity to reflect and get right with God.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's him and 89-90% of the rest of the population.
You know who else had that whole thing and became a Christian in prison? A quote unquote Christian in prison?
Son of Sam?
New York's greatest killer, Son of Sam. Another one that we're going to cover. He wrote a book about it.
Yep.
Glenda Ray, the daughter, pleaded no contest to a kidnapping charge and received a sentence of 9 years for second-degree kidnapping. So, now the plea deal does go in here. 6 years were suspended, and she was to serve 5 on probation. So the plea deal that he gave was he was going to plead guilty so that she could receive 5 years of probation. Well, they did give her 5 years of probation, but they also gave her 3 years in prison because they sentenced her to 9 years with 5 years probation, but they suspended 6. So that means she served 3 years in prison. So they technically upheld their end of the deal. They gave her 5 years probation.
Didn't read the fine print though.
They just added 3 years of prison on top of it.
I can't believe they would give somebody that they knew was such a light sentence like that. I get the feeling that they probably didn't have a lot of evidence on her to begin with.
So this is the thing: is David Parker Ray was more of a honeypot to them. They would rather get him convicted because he did so much. He was the name in all the papers. They would rather get that plea deal, not worry about the trial, get the plea deal. And to be honest, this is we talk about you said I can't believe that they would give such a small sentence. I have seen people that they get involuntary manslaughter or something like that, car accident, even second degree murder for dealing drugs that killed somebody, that overdosed. Most of them get probation. That's it.
Yep.
Hey.
Welcome to our judicial system.
Yep.
America's judicial system is a joke.
It's broken, and it's been broken for many.
And it will never be fixed.
Nope.
We need to go back to like Wild West times where we hang people in the streets.
Or Turkish jails.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Russian jails.
Yeah.
Let's go to Russian jails. Ray soon appealed his sentence. He said that his plea had not been voluntary and that his exhausted mind was clouded by his ill health, the medications, and the pressure applied by his legal counsel. A 3-judge panel rejected his appeal, stating that Ray had been on a normal dose of medication at the time he made the deal, and he had not complained about undue pressure from his attorney. He also had no expert to testify that the medication had confused him. Thus, the deal remained in place, but he wouldn't be serving much of this sentence. In May 28th, 2002, just as he was about to be transferred to the general prison population at the Lea County Correctional Facility, David Ray Parker suffered a genuine heart attack and died. He was 62. Thank God. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy.
Yep.
In November that year, state police officially opened the toy box to the public in hope that renewed media attention might help identify other victims and suspects. Inside was a poster that said, so when I say that they opened the toy box to the public, I'm saying that they took this trailer, they opened it up for people to walk through and look at.
Kids Day.
This was
Bring the family.
It's what it was. It was a tourist attraction, and it stayed that way for quite a long time. I don't know if it's still up, but yeah, you were able to look at it for a long time. Inside was a poster that said Satan's Den and a sign that stated bondage room. The obstetrical table was still there, complete with clamps, leg stretchers, electrical wires, straps, and chains. Ray had devised 2 sharp hooks, wrote one reporter, that were apparently designed to prevent his victims from getting up or resisting electric shocks. Inside a steel cabinet were numerous surgical instruments, and near it was a coffin-shaped box used to terrorize and contain victims. Ray's meticulous log was also available, showing how he kept records of what he did to each person. To ensure that no one escaped, he had rigged an elaborate alarm system and had written reminders to secure all collars and straps before leaving. With Ray dead, the investigation fizzled out. No bodies were ever found, no possible victims were identified, and no suspicious deaths loosely associated with Ray were solved. Nevertheless, many sources peg him as a serial killer, a smart one. And then according to Jim Fielder in the book Slow Death, both surviving victims went on to form relationships and start families.
That's good. I don't know. I mean, I definitely can believe he's a serial killer, but the lack of bodies. I mean, he works for the state. He have everything. I mean, that's probably still like trying to find a needle in a haystack, considering how big some of the parks are
Hmm.
in New Mexico.
I mean, it's more
But
like trying to find a piece of hay in a needle stack.
mm,
It's near impossible. I definitely think he's a serial killer. I just think that they
I just
never
don't
could
know.
find the bodies.
No, I just don't see. I just don't know if that 60 body count is accurate though. My gut tells me it's lower.
Um,
I think it's more along the lines of like 15. Like I think his primary goal was the sexual sadomasochist part of it, and he just figured, okay, I figured out how to control them. I pump them full of drugs, and then I kick them out. And I mean, he probably figured location. It's probably a bunch of drifters and drug addicts going out into the desert, getting high and getting lost. Sure, this isn't the first time these cops have found somebody like this. And
um,
like I think you said before, Aaron, this guy is a state worker. He's probably well known.
Yeah,
People are just not going to believe. What, Dave? Dave wouldn't do that. These,
exactly,
these are some
exactly.
crazy people. Look at this woman. She's all nuts.
Especially in such a small town.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think, like I said, I'm not. I think he did kill him. I don't know what. I mean, any secrets he took with his death. So I mean, he may very well have killed 60 people. We're never gonna know unless we start combing every park and resident area that he worked in. Um, we'd probably be lucky to find any kind of victim,
well,
and that's assuming he even buried anybody in State Park. It would
I
probably he
I
seems
don't
like a he's,
I don't think I don't think anybody was buried. So we have to keep in mind. So he worked for the state parks, which means he probably did maintenance of the lawns, stuff like that. So this means that he has access to numerous chemicals
Hmm.
could have been.
and knowledge of how chemicals work. So my thought is he concocts a chemical that breaks down the bones and the skin and everything else, and he he gets rid of it, throws it into these woods where animals take care of the rest.
I mean, let's be real. All you need is a 6 foot pole and a bag of lime.
Yeah.
That's all you need.
Um, I honestly believe a lot of these numbers probably been inflated by everybody, all of his like accomplices. Probably in the fact that just everybody got caught, every man for themselves or woman for themselves. So everybody starts making up stories in order to be like his daughter even's like, oh, I tried to file a report at the police that my dad was kidnapping and selling women in Mexico. Really?
Hmm. Now,
We're poor.
the one thing that surprised me with these trials is that they never considered a change of venue.
Yeah, I mean,
That surprised me because you have such a small town, so you have a small jury selection.
I don't
A
think that
majority of them,
I don't think that they selected the jury from the town. I think that they went to the next biggest town.
which in this case sounds like it would be Hobbs, New Mexico.
Yeah, I think that they selected from there because they would never be able to have a non-biased jury.
well, that's where I was going with that.
I think that they
So,
pulled from a bigger town.
so they did a change of venue and just never specified that in any of the reportings.
Yeah, they
Uh,
they would have they would have pulled from Hobbs, grabbed people from there, and done that because otherwise you would never in a town that small in 1999 when everything started 1999 until
yeah,
2000 you have a
yeah,
population of 200 people.
yeah.
You have
Everybody knows everybody.
yeah you I mean we had a population of 130,000. I knew a majority of the people there.
Yeah, and you and I saw firsthand how difficult it was sometimes to find an unbiased jury,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
you know? And that's with 113,000.
Um, yeah, like I said, I think whatever secrets David Ray Parker he took with him to his grave, and whoever his victims are, unfortunately, he probably buried or got rid of the evidence of them, and we'll never find them. And he probably also made sure that any disposal of it was done strictly by himself, because in the whole time, none of his other accomplices, especially his girlfriend, who seems to have been his like right hand person in this whole thing, didn't even. I mean, she served 36 years in her term. If she had had bodies to point to, she probably could have gotten an even lesser sentence than that.
Yeah, I think in that aspect, it was less hands in the honey pot is better for me, kind of thing.
Hmm.
And just put them out there and leave them for the animals and let nature do its thing. So
According to what I'm looking at, the toy box is still at the FBI office in Albuquerque.
Mm-hmm.
dude, let's go to Albuquerque.
I'm good.
I'm going. I'm going. That's on my bucket list now.
Um,
It's a weird bucket list.
Hold on, the toy
Well,
box.
yeah.
Yeah, so toy box
Most definitely.
trailer. You can still go visit the toy box trailer.
I'm there.
513 Bass Road, Elephant Butte, New Mexico.
Ben,
Butte.
I'll tag you on Facebook.
Um, yeah, so there's a website called Morbid Tourism where you can go there and it'll give you different
Really?
places. Like I can search like Kentucky, and it's got the standard uh a shooting from Louisville in 1989. Um, yeah,
Nice.
you can choose all these different places, and it'll tell you like what's there. Like in New York, there's John Lennon's assassination site, Amityville Horror House, David Berkowitz's apartment, Donna Loria shooting, and the Station Square Son of Sam shooting. Tells you where it's
Wow.
at, how to get there, all of that stuff.
Wow.
Um, but yeah, so uh, it's still there. Um, but yeah, so uh, I think next week Ben will be doing an episode. When let's see, when this comes out, we will have already you and Pamela already have been here. But we are going to visit the uh, Ohio State Reformatory.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to try and take video in there if they'll let us. I'll tell them about our podcast and everything and see if they'll let us take video, and interview some of them and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, because Ohio State Reformatory, that it's one we might actually do a story on,
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
because obviously it is one of the most haunted places in Ohio, but it was a Ohio State Reformatory is gorgeous. It was built. It's a prison, but it was built to look like a mansion because they felt like prisoners would be able to be reformed better in a place that did not look like a prison. And the place was so big that when you were a guard back in the day when it was active, you were able to live there with your family.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That was included in your employment contract that you live there.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. The Ohio had the electric chair.
Mm-hmm.
So their electric chair is named Sparky, and Sparky is there. We'll get to see it in the museum. So
Cool.
we'll get to see the electric chair and all of that
Cool.
stuff. Um, but we'll see if
Hell
we can
yeah.
take video and post video and stuff like that.
I'm stoked.
And yeah, so with that, I believe we are all set to go. So I would like to thank you for visiting the Scarlet Tavern. Please remember to turn in your glasses, push in your seat, and as always, tip the bard. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.